右のあれが切れちゃった。それはクリスに自分が使うの？
使ってクリスに渡します。
最近いろいろリリースが多いですね。いやスリップして出ちゃったんだよ。誰が出番ですか。
Yes. Right. So we will start shortly. Please sit down. We start shortly. Alright, so we'll start. First of all, thank you so much for coming to our event. We are Take Action today. So maybe it's your first time to hear what's a Take Action today. So I just briefly introduce about the Take Action today. And then today we have a great presenter, Chris Ye, following my introduction. So. Okay, so what's a Take Action today? So it's a small study group. Actually, in Silicon Valley, we have a lot of cut etching technology like Google and Facebook, something like that. And also every day we have a seminar. So it's really great place to stay here. We have a lot of latest technology stuff and information, what's going on in the world. So that's why being here in Silicon Valley is just really, we are taking advantage. But if we, basically Japanese, if we don't tell what's going on in the valley to our friends in Japan, it's just really like wasting the information or wasting a lot of capital, human capital. So that's why small study group Take Action today provides a great courses to know what's going on in the valley, and then we must take small action today through learning the study. For example, today the Chris Ye is talking about the new employer and employee management system. So based on that, you're learning what's gonna you do today is a question. So and then hopefully we're gonna make a small action lead to a big change in Japan. One up more, please. Okay, so we had 4 sessions in the past. The first one was U.S. Venture Capital Overview, which is presented by Chris Ye. He's a venture capitalist, so what's going on in the USA, and it's really like sophisticated the world. So we learned about the venture capital world. And then the second, so we had author of the book about Japanese entrepreneurship. So we learned why Japanese entrepreneurship is different from Silicon Valley. So we learned a lot. And then the third, we compare Stanford and University of Tokyo in terms of technology licensing, startup, and so on and so forth. So what we've learned is there are huge differences. Of course, University of Tokyo is the #1 university in Japan, but we have a lot to learn from Stanford actually. And then the last one, the latest one, the women's social advancement, which is a big issue in Japan. So we had Ari from a women's startup lab. She's a Japanese, but she has an accelerator in Menlo Park, and then they have already 20 startups from that. So I think she has a great insight what we can apply in Japan. So since last year, we had 4 sessions, and then today is the 5th session. Did you go to? Next slide, please. And then today's topic is the alliance. So the managing talent in the network age. And then, so the speaker is Chris Ye. And then he's actually went to Stanford when you were 15.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, that's incredible. I wanted to know how to get it anyway. And also, he got a double major at the Stanford. And after graduating Stanford, he went to a DE show, which is a hedge fund in New York. And then he was based in Boston, right? And then after that, he went to Harvard Business School, and then where you got a Baker Scholar, right? Which is highest distinction, I guess. And then after that, he started a company, and then sell the company, and then he got a fund, which is sort of his start for his angel investment. And then which is 2003 or 2004. And then that is called Wasabi Ventures. So he's now founder and general partner of Wasabi Ventures, which is started from 2004. This is the 10 years anniversary, sort of. Great. And just a little bit stuff. Could you go next slide? Actually, the Alliance book will come next month. So today, this is the notification for Gamura-san. So that even him, he doesn't have a book yet. But today is a great day. The author is having a talk about the book before having anybody see in the world. So this is the first time to talk about this book, the concept. So this is really a premiere time. So please enjoy. And then actually, he co-authored this book with Lido Hoffman, which is the founder of LinkedIn, and also the Ben Kaznoja. He's an entrepreneur. And then this is a book of Reed and Ben, the startup review. This published maybe 2 years ago. And then actually this is translated in Japanese, but they did not sell a lot in Japan. This is because there was no Chris. So this time, so we have Rita Hoffman and Ben Kaznoja and Chris Ye. They're co-authoring this book, The Alliance. This will come soon, and it will be translated in Japanese, I believe, maybe next couple of years, a couple of months. Yep, pretty earlier. Cool. So, please give a big hands to Chris. So, here is a talk about Chris Ye about The Alliance. Thank you.
I'm told the clicker doesn't work, so I'll just signal back whenever I want the book to move forward. There's a stage. I like the stage. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you to the folks at Jetro for hosting us. It's very generous. And thank you, of course, to Miyanagi-san and Hokumura-san for organizing this. I like to tell people that I'm extremely lazy. And so as a result, we've got one that works. I'm extremely lazy, so I like other people to do all the work. And then once they set it up for me to show up and talk, I'm more than happy to show up and talk. So the topic today is the new book, The Alliance, Managing Talent in the Networked Age. And what we try to do in this book is to describe what we feel is the future of the employer-employee relationship. Our focus is, of course, on Silicon Valley, because that's what we know best. But we feel like the ideas in the Alliance will actually apply to folks all around the world. And I'm looking forward to having a discussion at the end in question and answer about how some of these ideas might apply to Japan. So the first thing that we really want to emphasize is that we've all felt this fundamental disconnect of modern employment. Even those of us who are bosses and managers feel this disconnect. And what is this disconnect, you might ask? It's the fact that the employer-employee relationship is based on a dishonest conversation. And we don't mean that people are lying about what school they went to or what companies they work for. We say that for Yahoo CEOs. No. Rather, what we mean is that when you are a manager and you're talking with your employee, both of you are pretending. Your employee is pretending, I love working for this company, I'm going to work here the rest of my life. Even if maybe they're thinking about starting their own company in a couple of years. And if you're a manager, you're also lying. You're saying, yes, of course, you're a member of our family, and we believe in you, and we trust you, and we really want you to be a part of this forever. But you're thinking, unless, of course, the economy goes south, then I have to lay you off because I need to cut costs. So everyone is pretending that there is this notion in the United States of lifetime employment, where no matter what happens, I can never get fired, and I'll be able to stay at the same organization forever. Now, in Japan, I know that for a long time, lifetime employment has been the case. But I've read that even in Japan, this is starting to break down as well. And so the big question becomes, how do we replace it? When the economics change and when it's impossible to be honest about a lifetime employment agreement, what can we do instead? So managers are caught in the middle. If you're a manager, you are working with your employees, you are encouraging them to stay at the company, but at the same time, you yourself have a manager, you yourself have bosses, and you may fear for your own job. What are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to be honest about all these things? We can't keep going the way that we've been going. In the United States, what we've done instead to replace this notion of lifetime employment is we've adopted the concept of free agency. How many people here have been told, hey, you're now a free agent, right? You're now into personal branding. You're building a startup of you, if you will. The problem with the free agent concept is that it says there's no loyalty. If you look at sports, what does a free agent say when he leaves one team and goes to another team? Well, I was doing what was best for me. It's a free country. LeBron James just opted out of his contract in Miami. He may leave the Miami Heat just like he left the Cleveland Cavaliers. Do you feel like he showed a lot of loyalty? On the other hand, he would say, listen, these organizations may not have showed loyalty to me. The instant I get injured, I'm out the door. So how do we build a sense of trust despite this? A business without loyalty is a business without long-term thinking. So if you don't believe your employees are going to be around for a long time, why would you invest in training? If you don't believe you're going to be sticking around the company for a long time, why would you worry about the long-term health of the company? A business without long-term thinking is a business that can't invest in the future. We live here in Silicon Valley, which is all about investing in the future. How could we look out and start a company that may not go public for 10 years unless we're willing to commit to it? Unless we're willing to find a way to say, look, I'm going to be a part of this. I'm going to be a part of a relationship. We believe it's time to rebuild the employer-employee relationship, to take this notion of free agency and create something that is far more powerful. Ultimately, we need a new relationship framework where people are going to make promises to each other. They're not going to say, we're all free agents. We all are just on our own. They're going to come together, but they're going to make promises they can keep. They're not going to lie to each other. The alliance is about laying that path forward. And what do I mean by saying an alliance? Well, an alliance means that you have two parties who have come together. They're two independent parties. It's not a parent and a child. It's not a situation where you have a higher and a lower. You have peers who are working together. And these peers, these two independent players, will have interests. These interests will overlap in some cases and will not overlap in others. And that's okay. When France and Britain get together to fight Germany or something like that, do they say, look, we're going to fight a common enemy. That means we're now one country. No, that's definitely not the case. And when they get together in an alliance to tackle an objective, do they say, hey, let's just try hard and everything will work out for the best? The answer to that is also no. Instead, they get their foreign ministers together and they write out everything that's going to happen. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? How am I going to benefit? How are you going to benefit? That's the nature of an alliance. You write up a treaty and you formalize what's going on so that each party knows what they're getting out of it. And that's the fundamental paradigm that we believe employers and employees need to have today. Now, beyond that overall framework, there are three key components that we talk about in the book. They are the tours of duty, network intelligence, and corporate alumni networks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how each of these fits into the concept of the alliance. The concept of the tour of duty is that it allows people to build trust and mutual investment. Now, tour of duty is a term that you may have heard coming from the military. Oh, he's gone on a tour of duty to Iraq. And what we mean by this is that there is a specific mission that an employee is trying to accomplish. And that mission is agreed upon by the employee and the employer. And that mission is a finite mission. It's not a permanent mission that says, make the company great and it's going to last forever. It's a mission that says, we're going to launch this new product, or we're going to build this new business line. And together, we're going to accomplish this mission. And we believe that this mission is going to occur over this period of time. The tour of duty approach can relieve the pressure on you as a manager and your employees because it builds the trust incrementally. Think about what happens when you're asking people to make a lifetime commitment. It's like a marriage. You want to be really sure. It's a big decision. Gosh, I don't know. Is it going to work out? Is it not going to work out? That's a tough decision to make. And in the case of marriage, you've probably gone on at least, what, 2-3 dates with someone? In contrast, if you think about the employment agreement, when you go and interview at a job, at a company for a job, you might go through a set of 2-3 interviews. You might know the people for a couple of weeks, and then you're expected to make a decision that might last a lifetime. That's not something we ask people to do when they get married, and it's not something we ought to ask people to do when they're taking on a job. Instead, build trust incrementally. Commit for the next couple of years. Commit for this particular mission. And based on each person's performance, each person's ability to actually live up to what they've agreed on, then you can determine whether they're worthy of further trust. Every time you commit in these smaller steps, you can prove yourself to each other and build something bigger. And in fact, one of the things we talk about in the book is the fact that there are different types of tours of duty. The first type of tour of duty is what we call a rotational tour of duty. And what we mean by a rotational tour of duty is that a group of people are being brought into a company, often at the same time, with a specific mission. If you think about investment banks, you bring in a class of analysts. If you think about a management consultancy, you bring in a class of associates. And these people are all working together, learning about the company, spending a couple of years at the company, developing relationships. And they may move on to business school, they may stay and continue to grow, but that is a suitable on-ramp. Everyone knows what they're getting out of that, right? That may be the last time in their career where they know what they're getting out of the job, but they know what they're getting. A specific 2-year period where they're going to learn about each other and learn about the world. The second type of tour of duty is what we call a transformational tour of duty. And this is something that is personalized to the individual employees. This is something that is the job of the manager. Ultimately, as a manager, your job isn't simply to notice who's there and who isn't. It's not simply to hand out a performance review at the end of the year. It's to work with each individual to figure out what is it that they're trying to accomplish. What are their unique values that they can bring to your company? And how do you guys work together to build value for the company and for the individual? These transformational tours of duty allow people to progress in their career. Your first tour of duty may be as an analyst at an investment bank. Your next tour of duty may be as a product manager launching a product line. And after that, perhaps you're going to be a vice president. But the idea is these transformational tours of duty transform the trajectory of your career. You were at point A at the beginning of the tour of duty, and its job is to move you to point B in your career, after which point you can do another tour of duty to move to point C in your career. And these tours of duty don't have to take place in different companies. They can take place within the same company. It's simply a question of coming up with new objectives and new things to accomplish. Offering a clear tour of duty with specific benefits and success outcomes is going to be better for retention as well. So any of you who've been a manager, you've probably had employees who come to you and said, I've gotten another job opportunity. I'm sorry, but I have to leave. And when that happens, it's very difficult to get them to stay. Maybe you tell them, I can get you more money. Maybe you tell them, I'll get you a promotion. But usually they've already made that decision. I mean, how many people here have successfully kept someone from leaving their company by offering them more money? one person. It's difficult, right? They've already made the decision. And when you don't have an explicit promise, you don't have an explicit agreement for what the employee is supposed to do and what the employee gets out of it, that's the situation you end up in. But if you're having an honest conversation with your employee and you know what they want, then as the employer, as their current employer, you're better able to offer them a future than anyone else. Think about it. They already know who you are. They already know your company and they know they fit in. They know you as a manager and know how much they can trust you. So when you take this approach and you're working with existing employees, you ought to be better able to retain them than ever before. A few of the managers we spoke with worried. Hey, this framework, is it giving employees permission to leave? Is admitting that people change companies giving people permission to leave? Is that going to increase turnover? And the answer is no. Has anyone here ever had an employee come to them and say, hey, I'd like your permission to leave. If you say no, I won't go. It's okay. Doesn't happen. Because ultimately employees are going to make their own decisions. And this generation of employees that we have today, brought up in a world in which they're taught to think of themselves as free agents, more likely than ever to make their own decisions. So believing that you have the power to stop them is self-delusion. What you need to do is you need to be honest about what you can actually do as a manager. Tours of duty help an employee build their long-term career at the company. In the book, we talk about someone named David Hahn. David Hahn joined LinkedIn shortly after the company was founded as a 25-year-old. Over the course of his time at LinkedIn, he had 4 separate tours of duty. They left him ultimately as a vice president in charge of a business unit with over $1 billion in sales. Now that's somebody who's built a long-term career with the company, despite the fact that he always said, someday I want to start my own company. Now you could say, gosh, anybody who says they want to start their own company, I don't want them to work for my company. I don't want somebody who's that disloyal. But on the other hand, wouldn't you like to have someone who's talented enough to run a $1 billion business line for you? And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you attract the best people by offering them a better deal. The second point, the second component of the alliance is what we call network intelligence. And what we mean by network intelligence is this. Imagine that at your company, a dilemma has come up. You're trying to figure out the answer to a thorny problem. What is the first thing that you probably do? Well, for most people, it's you try to get all the smart people at the company together in a room and say, hey guys, here's the problem. What do you think the answer might be? This has historically worked reasonably well, but it's really missing out on the larger point. There is a broader, more useful resource out there waiting to be exploited that most people don't exploit. And that is the network intelligence of all your employees. So one of the examples we use in the book is the example of PayPal, very successful company. My co-author, Reid Hoffman, was one of the early executives at PayPal. And during the early days of PayPal, PayPal was facing off in a battle against a company called BillPoint. So BillPoint and PayPal were both in the payment space. But BillPoint had some major advantages. BillPoint was actually owned by eBay, which was PayPal's main partner. BillPoint was also partially owned by Wells Fargo Bank, one of the world's biggest banks. And so PayPal was competing with a company that was wholly owned by their largest customer, and that was partially owned by one of the world's most important banks. And here was PayPal, this startup that had no banking relationships and that was trying to compete. Now, one of the things that Reid did was he said, we really have to understand what BillPoint is doing. This is a tough competitor, and we are going to lose if we don't understand the market better than they do. And so they sent all of their people, not just their executives, but their individual engineers and salespeople and so on, out into the marketplace to talk to people and ask them, what's really important? What are the folks at BillPoint saying? What do you think is going to cause victory in the marketplace? And what they discovered were 2 very interesting things. The first was that the folks at BillPoint were convinced that the #1 thing that would allow a company to succeed in internet payments was to have a strong banking relationship. And they thought, hey, we've got Wells Fargo, we got that set, we're going to win no matter what. And the second thing is, when they talked to all the people who were the actual users, the eBay power sellers who were taking payments, they didn't say that a banking relationship was the most important thing. What they said instead is, I want something that's really integrated into my selling process that's easy to use. And PayPal only found this out by asking people. This was not something that the individual executives could have figured out by sitting in a conference room together. This was everyone in the company spreading a wide net, asking, hey, help me understand this marketplace. Now, as we know, the way the story ends is that PayPal ultimately was much more successful than BillPoint. BillPoint ended up being shut down. And eBay, after writing off, I think, a $60 million investment in BillPoint, ended up buying PayPal for over $1 billion. So that was a case where leveraging the network intelligence of the employees was the difference between going out of business and making $1 billion. The interesting thing about this is it's not like this resource has to be carefully cultivated in order to leverage it. Your best employees are going to be building their external networks anyways. Think about the best employees in their companies. They're out there. They're building a name for themselves. They're meeting other people. They're developing relationships. They're not just necessarily sitting at their desk doing nothing but working. Now, I'm going to do a brief interactive portion of today's talk. Most of you probably have LinkedIn accounts. So can everyone who has an account on LinkedIn please stand up for a second? Go ahead. So you guys are all, you have LinkedIn accounts. It's not because it's a really fun website to use where you get cool gossip about celebrities, right? You're on LinkedIn for a reason, to develop relationships. Now, everyone who has less than 100 LinkedIn connections, sit down. 200. 300. 400. Oh, I see, this is going to be good. 500. Now, the people who are standing up are all super connectors. They all have over 500 LinkedIn connections, which is as high as LinkedIn goes. I believe I've talked to the product people and they said that they didn't want it to go higher because then people got really obsessed about it. But you're all super connectors. Now, the people who came with you tonight, did they all know that you guys were super connectors? Would the people in your companies know that you're super connectors? Maybe, maybe not. But that's the resource that's out there to be leveraged that every company has. And the only way a company's going to find that out is by being proactive about actually developing network intelligence. Thanks, you can sit down. It's up to you as a manager to encourage your employees to use their networks for the job. Now, like I said, most people are already building networks. You guys have all been building networks. So the question is, what would encourage you to use your network on behalf of the company? And our message is simple. It's an alliance. So if you want your employees to use their network for your company, doing things like cutting off access to LinkedIn or Facebook within the company firewall, or telling them things like, you know, you can't tweet on company time. Wait until you go home. All right, if you say that, does it seem very fair to then say, can you also please use your network to help us out? Companies are going to have to realize, and are realizing, that in order to exploit this valuable resource, they need a different relationship with their employees. Not one that tries to control them, but one that says, hey, let's work together. You can go ahead and use LinkedIn and Facebook while you're at work. You can go ahead and tweet. You can go ahead and build your networks. And we'll support that. But what we're asking from you is to actually leverage those networks on our behalf and to respond when we call. Finally, the last element of the alliance is the corporate alumni network. Now this is an interesting topic because I've heard from some of my previous talks for Take Action Today that corporate alumni are not necessarily very well looked upon in Japanese companies. If somebody departs a Japanese company, you may think, oh, well, I don't want to stay in touch with him or her. I don't want them to succeed. I mean, if they left the company, I hope they fail because it proves that they should have stayed at the company. And to that, I think, gosh, You know what? That's actually the wrong way of thinking about it. And the reason is that the corporate alumni relationship is the way you maintain a lifelong relationship with your employees, even if they're no longer your employees. Now, the idea of companies being family is very powerful, even if it's not true. The reason it's very powerful is because we want to be treated like family. We want to be loved. We want to know that we always belong. We want to have people who treat us well. And by saying that a company isn't a family, it seems like a lot of people feel like that's saying, oh gosh, if a company isn't a family, then it's just business and everyone's just a tool to be used. And we believe there's a middle ground. The middle ground is to say, even if the employment contract is no longer there, there's still a relationship. There's still something that persists over time. And that something is the corporate alumni relationship. If you look at corporate alumni, one of the most famous corporate alumni groups in Silicon Valley is what's called the PayPal Mafia. So PayPal, as described earlier, is a famous company. And the people who were the executives at that company went on to do amazing things. Reed founded LinkedIn. David Sachs founded Yammer, which was sold to Microsoft for 1.6 billion, 1.3 billion. Chad Hurley and Steve Chen founded YouTube, sold to Google for 1.6 million. Jeremy Stoppelman founded Yelp, publicly traded company. The list goes on and on and on. And one of the things that's very special about the PayPal alumni is the way in which they've continued to have those relationships and help each other. They've invested in each other. They've advised each other. They've been each other's customers. Now in this case, this alumni network is so powerful because the people felt like there is a long-term relationship. There is a lifetime relationship that we want to maintain. And in fact, the founder, Reed is a member of the PayPal Mafia. He's also personal friends with John Donahoe, who is the CEO of eBay. And what John Donahoe at eBay has done is he said, you know what? I see this power, and I'm going to leverage it. It doesn't take him a lot of money. Establishing a corporate alumni network is not that difficult. In fact, most companies already have a corporate alumni network on LinkedIn. There's a LinkedIn group for over 98% of Fortune 500 companies. But only a third of companies actually establish any kind of formal corporate alumni network. That's kind of crazy, right? I mean, I think all of you who might have left a company in the past, I'm not going to say that you did, but let's say you did, all of you probably keep in touch with at least one or two former coworkers. All of you have maintained those relationships. And many of you may even belong to a LinkedIn group or a Facebook group or some other mailing list that's for former employees. Does your company get involved in that? In most cases, the answer is no, and that's crazy. This is a huge potential asset that people are not taking advantage of. This is a way to continue that long-term relationship of mutual trust, mutual investment, and mutual benefit. Now, as a company, what can this alumni network do for you? Well, first of all, it can help you hire great people. Maybe it allows you to bring people back who left, have learned something, and now can come back and contribute more. It can also help you by having people who are willing to refer people to the company. And perhaps the most important thing is this. The last time you thought about joining a new company, what did you do to make that decision? Did you just sort of say, well, I talked with 4 or 5 people at the company in the interview process, and that's enough for me? Or did you go on to, say, LinkedIn, find some current employees or former employees that you had connections with, and ask them, hey, give me the real story. What's it really like there? And the answer is, in most cases, they're asking former employees, unless it's a close personal friend, because those are the people where it's not going to interfere with their job, with the job hiring process, and where those people don't have an incentive to lie. So in many ways, your alumni are now the most important influencer that teaches people what your company is all about. Second, alumni, just like your employees, are a great source of that network intelligence we talked about. This could be competitive information, best practices, industry trends, and more. In fact, they may be even more powerful than your current employees because they're not caught within your own echo chamber. Right? They're out getting experiences with different companies, with different people. They're even more powerful potentially than your current employees. And if you maintain a corporate alumni network and you have the ability to reach out to them for questions, to get their input, to get their feedback, and maybe to reward them with things if they give you useful information, you'll be in a much better position than your competitors. Finally, alumni refer customers. In the age that we live in, the social media age, increasingly purchases are done based on word of mouth, reviews, somebody that you talked with on Facebook. And how often have you gone onto Facebook or Twitter and said, hey, I'm looking to buy a new digital camera. Can anyone tell me which one they think is good? Well, same holds true for alumni. One of the organizations that has grasped this to the greatest extent is the consulting organization McKinsey & Company. So many consulting organizations like McKinsey & Company have long established powerful corporate alumni networks. And these corporate alumni networks have full-time staff. Bain and BCG, for example, have a full-time staff of 6 people that do nothing but help place alumni in other jobs. It's a free job search service. Why? Because placing alumni in other jobs results in business. McKinsey has over 200 alumni who currently run companies. Our CEO is a company with over $1 billion in revenues. Which management consultancy do you think they turn to when they're interested in getting some outside help? McKinsey. Which company do you think that Bain alumni turn to when they look for outside help? Bain. So if your company has alumni, and your company could potentially be referring either their own business at a new company or other people through word of mouth, that's an extremely powerful way to boost your bottom line. Yes?
How do we think about our company secret and network knowledge?
Excellent question. Ooh, this is a good question. So one of the key questions is, and one of the big fears about networking is, if I let people go out and talk, are they going to reveal secrets? Is stuff going to leak out? And if you look at things that have happened in the past, I would argue it's not individual employees that are the big source of leaks. It tends to be board members who are the source of the leaks. But nonetheless, it's an issue that you actually have to tackle when it comes to network intelligence. And one of the nuances in the book is we talk about the importance of being able to detail for people whether information is private or secret. And here's the distinction. There can be information that's private that you share. Maybe it's some best practices on how you do things. Maybe it's some things where you're not going to go out and put press releases about it, but it's knowledge that you can use to trade with other people. Something that's private could potentially be given to someone outside the company. But something that's secret is something where the secrecy absolutely has to be maintained, and no one outside the company can hear. Now, most companies just talk about, oh, they're the same thing, private, secret, and as a result, employees don't really know what they can talk about. Part of building one of these effective network intelligence programs is saying, here's what's private, here's what's secret. Here's what you can talk about, not in public, don't tweet this stuff out, but in conversation with other people, and here's stuff that just cannot be used. This is actually something that LinkedIn does, and it's not just because Reed is the founder there. LinkedIn does a all-hands meeting of all employees every 2 weeks. How many people have had an all-hands meeting in the past 2 weeks for their company? Nobody, right? It's an unusual practice. But the reason they're able to do that is they're very clear about what information can be shared with other people, what information is public, and what information is secret. And they are able to hold all-hands meetings every 2 weeks for all the 10,000, 20,000, I don't even know how many employees they have anymore, without the leaks necessarily occurring. It's because they're very clear of what employees can and can't talk about. Finally, alumni are brand ambassadors. So let's say your company serves the public. When people go online and they tweet about your company, they say, oh man, something is bad about the company. Does it help if current employees tweet, no, the person who writes my who signs my paychecks, they're not that bad. They're actually very good. You don't have credibility. But the alumni of the company are more disinterested. They're third parties, and they have credibility that the current employees can't. If your company is in trouble and you need your alumni to rally to you, you'll be in a lot better position to do that if you've built a lasting, continuous relationship with them than if you're going to them at the last second saying, hey, I need your help now. I know I haven't called you in a couple of years, but I really need your help, and can you do me a solid? Maintaining that relationship is what allows you to call on it when you actually need it. As the old saying goes from Harvey McKay, dig your well before you're thirsty. Your corporate alumni network, and this is important, it's a potential profit center, not just a line item cost. When you start thinking about all the things that the corporate alumni can do for you, hiring, brand ambassadorship, actually referring business, and when you consider how little it costs to operate, I mean, heck, Facebook is free, LinkedIn is free. All you need is to have some people spend some time pushing, your corporate newsletter out to alumni and having a few meetings. eBay, for example, they just go ahead and have dinners for classes of people. So like the people who joined eBay between 2004 and 2005, that would be one class. They'll have a dinner for them. How much does it cost to pay for some pizza? Not much. And yet, each employee that you hire, maybe you're saving $25,000 in headhunting fees. If you are McKinsey and you get a company to do an engagement, that might be $1 million engagement. Any one of those things pays for the entire corporate alumni network in one fell swoop. So, all these things together reflect the alliance. Our goal is to create a framework that enables both companies and individuals to trust each other and invest in each other for long-term success. Sometimes employees may leave. I have personally left companies myself, but I've always maintained relationships with the people that I left behind, and they've tried to maintain relationships with me, because we understand that we've invested in each other, and by maintaining those relationships, we can continue to reap the benefits of that investment. In closing, what I want to do is I want to think about what can happen if we adopt this framework. So imagine a world in which you and your employees can be honest with each other about what you're looking for out of the relationship, what you're willing to commit, and how long you're probably going to stay. Think about a world in which the managers and team members are going to actually define jobs that match their values and aspirations. And many of you have probably been in a situation where your boss has put you on a job where maybe that's not the best use of your talents, where you could add so much more value elsewhere. But if you don't have the kind of relationship where you can negotiate this, where you can talk about this, and where you can say, let's figure out the way to maximize our mutual benefit, you're going to end up in the wrong job. And a world in which the employees who move on can continue to have a relationship with the company. Japan is famous for companies that last a long time. I believe the world's oldest continuously operating company is a Japanese construction company that has been operating for 2,000 years. I'm pretty sure that company has more alumni than current employees. Now, most of those alumni are probably dead at this point. But it's still the case. There are probably more living alumni than there are employees. And that's true for most companies. And those are people who ought to be predisposed to help the company, who ought to be willing to refer others, who ought to be willing to serve as a network intelligence post, who ought to be willing to defend you in social media. Mutual investment creates value. That's the bottom line. A world of free agency means no investment, which means that people are just making transactions. In the world of game theory, there's a famous game called tit for tat. And the idea behind game theory is that if you have two parties, it's the prisoner's dilemma. If one prisoner confesses and rats out the other prisoner, they get a lighter sentence, but the other prisoner gets a really heavy sentence. The best way to actually create the most value, the way that creates the most value, if the two prisoners actually cooperate. But in order to cooperate, there has to be trust. If you think to yourself, I'm not sure if I can trust the other guy, I better rat him out before he rats me out. That way everyone loses. This game theory applies in real life. The ability to invest in each other and to make those investments grow over time and compound over time is a way that creates tremendous value that then both the company and the employee can share. Now, this free agency era, leveraged buyouts, restructuring, massive layoffs, this has been going on for almost half a century now. It's hard to undo those trends. People are very scarred. They don't trust businesses. They don't necessarily trust their employers. It's very hard for them to take the first step to develop that trust. but it's something that we believe can be done. We've created a framework in the Alliance that allows people to start building the trust. And ultimately, our message is that it's up to the managers to take the first step. It's not up to the employees to take the first step. The managers are the ones who control the paychecks, control the assignments. As a manager, start proving yourself trustworthy so that your employees will trust you. Trust them so they will trust you, and so that ultimately everyone will trust each other. Amazing transformations happen when people are honest with each other and the right talent can get to the right opportunity with the right philosophies. Your company can be a beacon for new talent and can be a place where your existing employees see the opportunity to grow over the rest of their career. You just have to actually start having an honest conversation. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys. It's your turn to build the alliances that are going to transform your company and your career as employees and managers. I'll just note that the Alliance is a blueprint. It's not just an argument for a new way to do business. It's a blueprint for how to actually achieve it. And you can actually go to theallianceframework.com right now and download the first chapter of the book for free. You can also sign up for our LinkedIn group, which will have special members-only events and webcasts and the like. And of course, if you like the first chapter, it would be nice if you would pre-order the book before it comes out, like Okamura-san has done. So with that, I will go ahead and conclude and open it up to questions. You asked the first question, so I'll let you ask the next question. Go ahead.
Okay. My question is some sort of punishment. There are some Japanese companies consider lifetime employment, and then so to prevent some punishment, then they create a lot of trivial works, and
Yeah.
they are trying to make some sort of preventing some sort of error or something. And also they want to choose good employees, and it takes a very complex high employment procedures and systems. But how do we think about preventing such kind of?
Excellent question. So the question relates to some of the practices that I've actually read about, where companies that have a lifetime employment contract with their employees want to get rid of them, because they put them on humiliating, tedious, boring jobs, hoping to get them to quit. What a horrible approach. Right? It's terrible. That's exactly the opposite of an alliance. You're mistreating employees deliberately in an attempt to get them to leave. And so that's really tough. And part of it is the fact that there are these legal contracts. Right here in the United States, we've basically moved to essentially an at-will employment. Right? In California, you can basically fire anyone at any time, and nobody can do anything about it. I think it's difficult. I think there's going to be a transition period, especially in Japan. You have a lot of employees who are on a lifetime employment contract. They're not going to want to leave. I think that the approach of attempting to drive them away with humiliation is bad. That's not going to work, because as I recall from reading the article in which I read about this, I think it was Sony that was doing this. The guy who was put on the assembly line said, "I don't care what happens, and they're never going to quit. They're going to have to carry me out when I'm dead." So I don't think they're even managing to save money by doing this. So I think that part of it is you have to start building a new kind of relationship with new employees as you come in. That's easy. There's not a lot of legacy. There's not a lot of scar tissue. But even for existing employees, I think that management has to make the effort. The employees, especially in cases where they've been treated like that poor fellow I talked about, they're going to be reluctant to trust. And so management is going to have to start showing that they are trustworthy. It won't be easy. Next question. Back there.
Actually, I know some of these concepts are being used by this one nonprofit organization called TAP, Taiwanese American Professionals. The founder of TAP is actually a consultant with Deloitte, so he uses like a business model like that. So, like, for example, this is like a 501c organization, and it grows membership to encourage these current members to bring their friends, like non-member friends, to like some happy hour parties and get them to pay $5 cover charges, and they make arrangements with the bars. If we bring 100 people, then for that day we get 20% of the revenues, and they grow the membership really fast that way. And then actually, this guy is actually went to UC Berkeley, has the MBA, so they have a good network of Cal alumni and Stanford alumni, and also Academy Art alumni, so they could include a lot of members. Like one of the few 501c organizations that actually has a lot of profit, and also they have a little alliance with other Asian American professional groups like CAP, like Korean American Professionals, and NAP, like National Association of Asian American Professionals. So they do really use their concepts really well for a nonprofit, actually.
No, and that's a great point. So this, we described in the book the ideas primarily in a corporate setting, but any organization should be developing an alliance. It could be developing an alliance with its members as opposed to a company developing an alliance with its employees. But that is the right way to think about the relationship. I think that a lot of nonprofits have a leg up because ultimately, as any of you who have ever either worked in a nonprofit or volunteered for a nonprofit know, if they're volunteers, if you're not paying them, you can't necessarily count on them to do things if you just order them to do it. And so nonprofit organizations have always known that they need to create a mutual relationship and that there needs to be something in it for the volunteer or member of the organization beyond simply a card. So I think that there's a lot that can be learned from nonprofit organizations and other membership associations in this area. Excellent. Next question. Over there.
My question may be somehow related to the first question. What do you think is the threshold or critical point to make things clear in terms of tour of duty without avoiding self-independent or self-motivated mindset? I know it should be flexible for every person, but do you have any idea?
That's an excellent question. So this is great because what I'm discovering from this talk is you guys are touching on some of the areas of the book that we expand the arguments in greater depth. So one of the things that we discuss in the book is our notion of what we call the corporate middle class. So in many organizations, you've always had the concept of tours of duty for the people who are the stars. Right? You look at a company like General Electric and Jeff Immelt, who's the CEO. The people who become CEO of General Electric have been groomed for this. They were identified early on as potential stars, and they were sent on different tours of duty throughout the organization to learn so that someday they could become CEO. And so a lot of companies have long said, well, we'll give special treatment towards the people we think are special. But there's problems with that. A, it's only a small portion of the organization, and B, it treats one group of people apart from the rest. It sort of creates jealousy and bad feelings. So we do believe that the ideas behind the alliance can be applied to the corporate middle class. We believe it's something that you should apply broadly within your organization. We think that things that enable you to do that today that you couldn't do before is the fact that, again, we have wonderful online technologies. We have the ability to collaborate with each other with various web-based applications and mobile applications. And so it's easier to sort of facilitate the conversation of, hey, here's what I was doing before, here's what we're working on now, here's how we record this. Instead of having to print something out and have everyone sign it, you can just take the notes online. I think it's also the case that for many organizations, it's going to take some doing. So managers are usually not used to having the conversation, hey, what are you going to do after you leave the company? Any of your managers ever ask that question of you? So it's going to be a big shift. But I do ultimately believe that it can be applied to all the different levels of the organization. And part of it is, people just need to have a role model. People just need to see that it works and see friends of theirs for whom it's working. And over time, it becomes easier and easier for people to adapt to the new system. Next question. In front, because I saw you get it up first. You were the second person last time, so you should be the first person this time.
Thank you for the great talk. My question may be a little bit off the topic, but it's about the future of the employer-employee relationship, so I'm going to ask it anyway. So I think the artificial intelligence technology is catching up to the human brain,
yes.
And a lot of the job is going to be taken over in a few years or 10 years or something like that. And if you have any idea on what would be the impact of it on the future employer-employee relationship, I'd like to hear about that.
Excellent question. So the question was, as artificial intelligence improves and more employees are replaced by artificial intelligence as robots and automation, how is that going to change the nature of the relationship? This is a fascinating, very broad topic. There's actually a good book about this that I haven't read, but I've heard the author speak a number of times. Andrew McAfee and Eric Bernelson have a book called The Second Machine Age, which is all about what they view as the future of work in an era of artificial intelligence and automation. And he's a professor at MIT Sloan and has written about this. I would say that broadly speaking, the biggest thing that we have to look for is that there have been transitions like this in the past. So we don't have to just, it's not just sort of out of nowhere that this has happened, right? If you look back 150 years, whether it's in the United States or Japan or what have you, 95% of the population was engaged in farming as their profession. Yeah. How many people are engaged in farming as their profession today? Not many. All those people had to go somewhere. And so different things opened up and developed. Now the biggest question is, what happens when artificial intelligences are able to do not just factory work as robots, but all the knowledge work that most of us probably do. And most of us probably don't want to be replaced by robots. So that is going to be tricky. It will be a gradual process. It's not like overnight they'll suddenly introduce the Model 1000 robot that is able to take over all human functions. It's going to be gradual. But what's going to impress us, what's going to be more important, is that all of us are focused on learning new skills, staying ahead of the oncoming robot army. One of the reasons why I do many different things, including write books, is because I feel like that will be one of the last things that robots take over. After that, they'll just come and try to, they'll just try to lock us away like in the Matrix or kill us in the Terminator. So, broadly speaking, I think the key is to focus on learning, to recognize the trends that are occurring, to recognize that sometimes when jobs go away, they don't come back, and to be alert and adaptable. We feel like the ideas of the Alliance do help with adaptability. As a company, you can be far more adaptable if you can take your employees and every couple of years transform their capabilities, build new capabilities, and transform what the company is about. But it won't be easy, and it's likely to be a little bumpy along the way, just because it's going to be a big transition. But an excellent question. Other questions? Over there.
So if you're a startup, if you don't have any kind of professional alumni network, what do you recommend for the startup manager to mature and nurture that corporate alumni network? Yeah.
Excellent question. So yes, if you're a startup, if you're a two-person startup, you probably don't need to worry about the alumni network just yet. Because if you have alumni if you have alumni, you're not going to have a startup very soon. But it is important to start thinking about your corporate alumni up front, because the founders of a startup ultimately determine the culture of that startup and ultimately determine how do we view alumni, how do we view people who leave. As traitors whose names shall never be mentioned and will be referred to as he whose name shall not be mentioned, or as people with whom hopefully there's a good relationship on an ongoing basis. It's also the case that by setting up in advance an alumni network using LinkedIn or Facebook or any other tool that you choose, you can funnel all your employees into one place. Finally, by thinking about an alumni network up front, you overcome one of the big issues, which is when someone leaves your company, how do you keep track of them? If you're gathering their information, their contact information, their permanent email address in case they didn't have one from your company, their LinkedIn account, their Facebook account, and so on and so forth, you'll be able to actually build your database and have a complete database instead of being like a lot of companies just wondering, I don't know where they are. So thinking about it now is actually a good idea, but you don't need to invest a lot of resources yet, because building an alumni network for 0 alumni is not necessary. Over there.
Hello. Yes, I'm a manager that manages a group of project managers, and the company I work for does have this rotation programs and does encourage actually to people to network out of the company. However, when I do approach these employees, and they're very bright, they think it's, oh great, it's just another job that I have to do on top of all the normal day work that they already have. So how do you balance that encouragement of getting them, I try to frame it as personal development for their careers, because that's how I've managed to be at the position I'm at. So how do I encourage the employees that I'm managing and try to balance between this personal development side and the ideas of alliance versus all the normal daily work that they have to do?
That's an excellent question as well. One of the things that happens in companies when they decide they're going to have a social media policy is they'll say something like, okay, everyone now, you're going to start tweeting. That doesn't work. I have friends, many friends at venture capital firms. And these days, all the venture capital firms are looking at, say, Andreessen Horowitz and saying, oh, how do we become more like them? And the answer is always, okay, every partner, start a blog. That doesn't necessarily work. Mandating participation is just like every other management fad. And people are like, oh, I smell this coming from a mile away, I don't want to do it. So the question is, how do you deal with that? How do you address that? The first is to not make it mandatory, to say, this is something that we think would be good, but if you don't feel like doing it, it's not necessarily part of your job requirement. If a job requirement says you have to tweet X times per week, unless you're a social media manager, that's a really bad sign that the company is going to impose those kinds of restrictions. But the other thing is this. We believe that the best way to show that you're serious about this and to give people the space to do it is to say, okay, if you're going to do it, we're going to actually set aside some time for you to do it. It could be it's the same time every week. It could be first thing in the morning. But no matter what, if you actually set aside time during the workday, and then you honor that, right? You don't say, do this, and then work your other work later on to catch up and make up for it. Again, it's about showing that you're worthy of trust and showing that they can trust you. And if you do that, again, not all of them are going to end up becoming social media mavens, right? It's not necessarily easy to write blog posts or to tweet or to be interesting, and frankly, some people are boring. But the people who really enjoy it and are enthusiastic about it, if you give them some space to do it, then they'll feel like, wow, look at my cool employer. They're actually giving me time on Thursday afternoon to work on my blog or to work on my Twitter account or something like that. And that demonstrates the company's commitment. But excellent, excellent question. A good way to get into some of the greater details. All right, any other questions? Over there.
I guess the examples you showed us is cases of the startups, right? So could you tell me the examples or cases of the big companies or traditional companies in US if you have?
Excellent, yes. There are a couple of examples that we either use in the book or we researched for the book and ultimately chose not to include. One of my favorite examples, and so I'll give you a negative example and then I'll give you a positive example. One of our favorite examples in the book is the negative example of John Lasseter. Now, some of you may know his name. Even those of you who don't know his name know of him because he is the chief creative officer of the Walt Disney Company and the creator of Pixar's movies like Toy Story, Toy Story 2, A Bug's Life, Finding Nemo, etc. One of the great value creators that we've seen. The interesting story about John Lasseter is he hasn't always been a Disney employee. In fact, he was most famous as a Pixar employee. Now, John Lasseter grew up loving Disney. He spent his entire life growing up wanting to work for the Walt Disney Corporation. He actually worked in Disneyland as one of those Jungle Cruise guys. If you've ever been to Disneyland, you see the Jungle Cruise guy. They pull out their gun, they fire to scare off the hippo and what have you. He was one of those guys. And then he finally got his job as an animator in Disney's animation division. He was in heaven. This was the greatest thing ever. And he went to a conference, SIGGRAPH, I believe it was, where he saw some of the things that were being done in computer-generated animation. And he thought, wow, this is so cool. It would be awesome if Disney did this. This could be great for us. And he went and he pitched the folks at Disney and said, hey, we should do computer animation. They said, oh, that's very interesting, John. And then he got back to his desk, and the phone rang, and he picked it up, and they said, you're fired, get out by the end of the day. Why are you wasting your time on this stuff? So, since he was fired, he had to go find another job. He ended up getting a job at Lucasfilm, which was George Lucas's outfit. And they were interested in computer-generated animation. And a few years after that, Lucasfilm, that unit of Lucasfilm was sold to Steve Jobs, and it became Pixar. And John Lasseter directed Toy Story and ultimately other movies that grossed over $2 billion at the box office. And one day, Disney bought Pixar for $9 billion. And a large reason was because they wanted to get guys like John Lasseter into the company, because Disney felt like they were losing, they lacked creativity and they were no longer able to produce great movies. Now remember, this is a guy that they had, who dreamed his entire life of working for them, and then they fired him for proposing the thing that ended up costing them billions and billions of dollars. So that's a negative example. It's an example I give because I think a lot of people look at that and say, wow, I wouldn't have done it. But on the other hand, you know, here's a young guy, an animator. He's supposed to be drawing pencil sketches and coloring things, and he's telling you he wants to use computers. Sometimes revolutions don't announce themselves. Sometimes you have to trust your people and their instincts. Now, a positive example of big companies, and this is like the most amazing, this is one of the most amazing things I've heard, and there have been other things that happened. So one of the things about the Alliance is saying, well, what do you get out of it? How are we developing you? So, just recently, Starbucks announced that every single one of their employees will be able to go online through Arizona State University and work towards their college degrees. And Starbucks is picking up the cost for that. Now, what does that say about the relationship that Starbucks tries to have with its employees? These are people who make coffee. They sweep up the ground, they do the things with the I don't even know what they're called. Like they're baristas, there's machines and whatnot. But this is not like a job you necessarily had to go to Harvard Business School to learn how to do. But all the employees of Starbucks get health insurance, and now all the employees of Starbucks who probably don't have college degrees can go ahead and get a college degree for free. Do you think that after someone gets their college degree from Arizona State, thanks to Starbucks, they're going to say, "See you, Starbucks, I'm headed out"? No, they're going to be grateful, and they're going to feel like this is a company that really invested in me, and I'm investing in it. There are other examples. The Whirlpool Corporation, they make the washing machines. They offer a college reimbursement program to all employees who work there for longer than 12 months, even if they're contract employees. So there are companies who would say, hey, you know what, there's ways to do this. There's ways to demonstrate our trust in and investment in our employees. And those companies, by the way, tend to do pretty well. It's very rare. Now, part of it is that a lot of companies, unless they're doing well, feel like they can't afford to do this. But you look at the performance of these companies, like Whirlpool, in terms of innovation, in terms of financial performance, they've done very well compared to their peers. But excellent question. By the way, Ken, I don't know, one more? Okay, one more. One more question over there. I never keep track of time, and I don't wear watches, so I have no idea.
Assuming you're running an early stage startup, where quick decision making is always required, and if you have employees who work remotely, how do you effectively apply your framework to your remote members?
That's an excellent question. The question is, how do you manage remote employees, which is very common these days, right? You have remote employees, they may be in a different country, they may even speak a different language. It's very difficult. This is a time when you need trust more than ever, right? You could go one of two extremes. One extreme is to use something like Odesk. So if you guys are familiar with Odesk, it's an outsourcing service. And what they do is their software actually takes pictures of the screen of the computer of the person as they're working to make sure they're not goofing off. Now, I don't know who's actually supposed to look through all those pictures and then determine who is goofing off. It seems like a lot of work to me. The other extreme is to say, okay, let's demonstrate how much we trust you. We're going to trust but verify in the phrase that Ronald Reagan used in the 1980s to talk about arms reduction and treaties. We're going to trust but verify. So you're a remote worker. I'm going to trust you to manage yourself and not goof up. Here's what I'm looking to get out of you. I'm not looking to get 40 hours a week out of you. I'm not even looking to get that out of my employees who are physically here. What I'm looking to get is this kind of production, this kind of achievement, and this kind of progress for my company. If you deliver those, then I'm happy. And by the way, not only you're going to deliver those to you, I'm going to deliver stuff to you. I'm giving you freedom. I'm trusting you to work on your own. Now, if that trust is betrayed, if they are goofing off and they consistently fail to deliver, well, the problem is not that they're working remotely. The problem is that they're a terrible employee and you should fire them. But it is possible, and I think that the trust-based approach is a lot better and a lot less work than the O-desk, take pictures of their desk or install a web camera and watch them 24/7 approach. But excellent question. So one of the things I promised to do before I go is I did bring a pre-release copy of the book. This is one of just a couple hundred that exist in the world right now that are outside the warehouse. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to present this to the brave soul who asked the first question. This will be his key. I'll autograph it afterwards for you as well, so you'll have an actual autographed copy of the book. Again, I want to thank our host at Jetro. I want to thank Miyanagi-san and Hokamura-san for organizing this. I want to thank all of you for patiently sitting through this presentation. The very first time I have presented about the book here in the world.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have a networking time until 9 p.m. We have a food over there. We have beer, we have a wine, and we have Ito and tea. So they are supporting us. So Miyaguchi-san, so could you give us a big hands to him because this is free. Thank you. Okay. And also the food comes from Delica. Do you know Delica? Delica is in San Francisco. They provide great food. So they provide korokke and also California roll and also salada, which is really great. So please enjoy your talk with new people and also networking and also alcohol. And then, so take action today. It's really late to tell you. So Hokamura-san and I founded this study group session. So Hokamura-san is over there. All right, so thank you so much. So let's move on to networking. All right, please feel free to go there.
素晴らしい。